Hello, my fellow professionals. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you have been having a great holiday season. Very recently, the PMI came out with the announcement that PMBOK 8 is on the way, and I don't know if you've seen the link and if you've been to what has been cooking in the oven, but I wanted to share my musings with you and put this out there for anyone who is musing in the same respects to kind of bounce ideas off each other. I think this is more of a collaborative sport than just doing things in a silo. So right off the bat, you get into the table of contents, you've got the introduction, and then you get to chapter two, and chapter two is on project management performance domains. Now, while the performance domains have been present in the seventh edition, in the eighth edition, they're modifications. And while these modifications are, in my mind, welcome, because the seventh edition had domains that was so far flung from the knowledge areas or anything that had happened before, going into these domains, the question I have is, why do we go round and round and round in circles? It's quite it's quite ludicrous, to be honest, that we start off at point A, then we get to a point X, only to go back to point B. And this has been the cycle of events with past PMBOK guides and now coming to this one, the eighth edition. I would have thought the most sensible thing to do is to backtrack. Because to be quite honest, we've wasted about 4 years with a PMBOK guide that got us absolutely nowhere. Well, let me backtrack. Maybe it got us a little bit forward in terms of we now have principles, 12 principles, and great. I love the 12 principles. It's PMI's way of getting a mindset, and that's good. But what I find trouble with is not just fessing up and saying, we screwed that one up, let's fix it. And I see them trying to fix it, but it's still adding a convoluted recipe to what is already existing somewhere else in another PMI verse. For example, the Agile Practice Guide has got the 10 knowledge areas intact. And I see them trying to correct back, steer back towards the knowledge area narrative. Instead of coming clean and saying we screwed up, let's just go back to the knowledge areas. I see them pussyfooting around these domains, these so-called domains. And honestly, the language is quite useless and convoluted. Here's why. For every PMI standard, we conflate these terminologies of domains. And when one is moving from one world of project management to the world of program management to the world of portfolio management, this whole talk of domains, it gets so muddy. As if that weren't enough, we've added, or should I say, we've borrowed from the program management standard, which existed in its own sphere. We've now brought that in here. I don't know if you folks caught that. If you haven't read the program management standard or you haven't been following the program management narrative from PMI, you wouldn't have gotten this. So let me go to the whiteboard and explain it a little bit, just give you a little bit of insight into what is happening. And then maybe you, in your understanding of the world of the PMI, maybe you will have some ideas of what we could do. So this is what the PMI have shared in terms of the new edition. So we have a table, something like this. And of course, this is not published. So it's up for debate, right? So I'm equipping you, those of you who are as passionate as I am about this, I'm equipping you so you understand what's going on. All right. So we have initiating, planning. I just make them all caps. Okay. So we have initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling and closing, right? These are all the process groups. PMI, well done in leaving this. Thank goodness thank goodness they didn't change them. So they call them process groups. Now, on this side, instead of having usual knowledge areas, they call these performance domains to the table, which again, I find not very helpful. I find them just confusing simple, straight ahead legacy PMI project management. So now they've borrowed from other standards like the program management standard. They now have governance. Let's do that again. Governance, scope, schedule, finance. Just call it cost, for goodness sake. There's no point changing this stuff. And then I think maybe in a bid to shrink down the number of so-called processes, they are trying to reinvent the wheel, and there's absolutely no need to reinvent this wheel. Stakeholders, stakeholders, resources. Again, I want to stress this stuff is all subject to change, right? Risk, and I think that's it. Is that it? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. So we have seven of these performance domains, which when you really look at this, you can ask, where is communications? Where is procurement? Why leave those out? It doesn't make any sense. So one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. So procurement is missing, communications is missing, and quality is missing. So I really don't understand the logic in this. Just bring back the good old Coke, Coca-Cola. You know, like they brought the new Coke in and new Coke didn't work and they brought back the good old Coke, right? Just bring back the knowledge areas and the process groups as we understand them. Some of the terminology, and I'll just go over the terminology at a high level for you. So instead of develop project charter, there's authorized project initiation. Instead of develop project management plan, it's integrate and align project plans. It's really ridiculous because there's no need to change the language. PMI has had its traditional classic, I think the fifth and the sixth editions were the best, the most comprehensive. If we're going traditional, let's just go traditional all the way, right? This is half baked. It does not present the full picture. And I can speak to this because among the project management trainers, there are those who train online a lot, on demand a lot, and there are those who are the boots on the ground doing it in companies. And I'm one of those boots on the ground who's been doing this in companies for a long time. In fact, going on 15 years now. I think I hit my 16th year next year. And whenever I go to companies, what they want, I'm going to show you what they want. Let's uh, let's cut to the chase. I'm going to show you what they want. What they want for their people who are managing projects, they want them to be properly educated and schooled in understanding this framework. When I compared this framework to what I'm seeing in the draft, it does not give any further value. In fact, it takes away from this. My concern is if we release yet another PMBOK guide with a shorted version of what really should be. We're just going to waste another 4 years, which means another 8 years wasted. This because the PMBOK Guide 7th edition has done nothing. Zero. When you're talking about value, apart from the principles, I would say there's zero value for a lot of companies, which is why when you go to these companies, you don't find the 7th edition around. What you do find is a 6th edition. See? Also, when we take a look at the image in the new edition, let's go back because now you get the idea of what I'm saying. When we go back over here and we take a look at the minutia, and I'm not going to go over the minutia, I'm just going to highlight a few things that are missing. Like I highlighted unnecessary change, just call it develop project charter, call it develop project management plan, whatever. But when you get further down, validate scope is now in executing. There's now a manage and control scope. Why not just leave the terminology as is? As if it was broken before. It wasn't broken. There was nothing wrong. These are all sentiments, and it's quite frustrating that every PMBOK guide edition, there's a new group of people who are working, to spearhead this thing, and they always seem to want to change what has existed. Validate scope has been in monitoring and controlling for forever. There was nothing wrong in it. There's nothing wrong in validate scope being in monitoring and controlling. Now you're putting a process called manage and control scope in monitoring and controlling when the word manage had always been associated with executing. How does that make sense? They've now put another one called manage sponsor engagement, which is, again, it's tedious and needless because we have managed stakeholder engagement. That's a one size fits all for all manner of stakeholders. It's, in my mind, quite silly. Then they've taken the communications knowledge area. This is what it was before the 4th edition. You see what I'm talking about going backwards? They've now taken the communications knowledge area and they've dumped it into stakeholders. So you have planned communications management in stakeholder, you have managed communications in stakeholder, and you have monitor communication in stakeholder. There's really no need for that. This is all splitting unnecessary hairs. And I am going to send my suggestions to the PMI, but I wanted to share them and ask you, have you taken a look at that document? If you have, what do you think? I want this to be a communal sharing of ideas, bouncing things back and forth. I think we can be more effective that way because there's really no forum for that. So I want to create a platform where if you are enthusiastic about project management and the world of the PMI, and if you've, like me, been in this organization for upwards of 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years, some people have been in this organization for forever. If that's you, let's have some dialogue. Don't you think this is just needless, tedious, going around and around in circles, going back to 2000? I think this is the 2006 or 2007 version that we're going back to. Instead of moving forward, we're going back. We're doing always doing too much, and we're doing the wrong thing, you know. Instead, we should be focused on where the world of project management is going to, more hybridized, more agile introduced, and the traditional hasn't changed a whole lot. Is this where we get it so wrong in the traditional world? We're always looking for a better mousetrap, but traditional project management has been around longer, even than the agile way of managing projects as we know it today. See. The Agile community has done a lot better, and I'm talking about the real Agile, not the fake one, because you got fake Agile, just bumbling, fumbling, unnecessary big old frameworks that don't add value. We've got them; those aren't Agile. But you talk about the true Agile community. When you look at how we have been able in the Agile community to at least uphold the Agile Manifesto values and principles, how can Schreiber and Jeff Sutherland and the rest of the Scrum community have been able to agree on 13 pages? Then you take a look at us in a so-called traditional community. It's always hundreds of pages, and unfortunately, it's always a dialogue on how can we confuse this as much as possible so that people will be frustrated. Seems to be the idea. How can we make this as confusing as possible to the layman? How can we make this as confusing as possible to people who've been on the journey with PMI? It's befuddling. It just makes me shake my head. But as a member of the community, I will continue to speak up and share my thoughts and ideas. And I think we're doing right in trying to steer it back. So don't let me be an ungrateful Oliver Twist asking for more without giving accolades to what we're doing right. I like the fact that we're trying to steer the ship in the right direction. But overall, here's my synopsis. Process Groups, a Practice Guide is another publication. How is that going to be updated? Is this going to be updated with the same stuff to further confuse issues? Just do this. Just fess up. We messed up in the seventh edition. We should have kept the traditional Coke. We shouldn't have changed it to new Coke. Even Coca-Cola, they knew this back in the day. PMI need to do a 180. They need to go back to what is in Process Groups of Practice Guide. They can leave it intact. They can minimize the verbiage, but they should leave it intact instead of confusing people who have been on the journey. You see, where PMI is missing it is a lot of the legacy content. They ain't changed that in the companies. No one has said, oh, well, I guess they call this manage scope now. Ain't nobody going to change that stuff. It's not going to change. People have so much vested interest. We're not talking about a groundbreaking new process. So people don't care whether you call it validate scope and you dump it in executing, or you call it validate scope and you leave it in monitoring and controlling, or you call it authorize project initiation, or you call it develop project charter. They don't care. They're not changing it. And this is going to be another example of carrying coal to Newcastle. We don't need this stuff. It's already in place. You're reinventing the wheel. You're doing stuff that is not going to be valuable. Keep what exists in Process Groups of Practice Guide. Work on the language. Get the language to be a bit more simplistic. Don't conflate process groups and knowledge areas by breaking out communications and sticking it into stakeholder management. Waste. Talk about waste of time, waste of money. Where are these people? How do they even come up with these ideas? Seriously? I don't know. I don't know. But one thing I can tell you, as an international trainer, people are not using the seventh edition. And because there's process groups of practice guide, and even though PMI pulled the plug on the sixth edition, it's out of circulation. But guess what? People are still buying the sixth edition from Amazon. Why? You know why? Because the seventh ain't worth the paper it's printed on, except the principles. Everything else, waste. So, what do you think? What do you think? I like the fact that we're staring back towards the traditional framework that we had on page 25, but I don't think we should keep the domains. The domains, we just need to let it go. Let's be honest and let it go. Bring back the knowledge areas. I don't know what this obsession with the word domain is, because when you're taking the PMP exam, and you look at the PMP exam content outline, what do you see? 3 domains. How many domain narratives are we going to have with PMI? You get what I'm saying? Okay. I'm going to get off my soapbox, but I'm going to be back to read the comments. All right. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope this gets you thinking and gets you musing about the next edition, because we've wasted 4 years. Let's not waste a whole decade doing rubbish, stuff that ain't nobody using. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Proof of pudding is in the eating. Find out how many organizations are managing projects with PMBOK 7. Is it a framework? I won't call it a framework. Zero. I have seen zero organizations say, oh, well, this is a great one. Let's use it. Zero. But when you look at the 6th edition, oh my goodness. I'm telling you, organizations are carving out sub frameworks from the 6th edition because it's so content rich. It's so content rich. Where's my 6th edition? My 6th edition, it's somewhere. I keep my 6th edition close because I get questions about it all the time. My 5th edition is up there. My 5th edition, I kept it because of the immense value. So PMI has done some really awesome work in the past decades. But now I feel we're losing our value selling proposition. There ain't nothing in the 7th. Honestly, 7th and even in the 8th that is being crafted, I cannot teach that in firms. I cannot. I cannot sell it to people. I used to, back in the day, I would sell tons and tons of PMBOK guides, like hundreds in the droves. I would sell them when I trained in every organization, even if they were doing project management basics. My conviction would propel me to show them where the value was. And I sold hundreds and thousands of PMBOK guides. 5th edition, 6th edition. At that time, I was a registered education provider. We would get a discount on them. And I would offer value by giving it to the client at no additional cost. Now, you kidding me? I ain't sold one single 7th edition. And I ain't promoting it because I'm honest. I don't believe in it. I ain't selling what I don't believe in. I don't believe in it. So what I do is I just show people, well, if you're a member of the PMI, you can get the Agile Practice Guide, and you can also download Process Groups of Practice Guide, but I ain't telling them to buy 7th edition. And at this rate, I'll be telling them to buy the 8th edition either. All right, let me know what you think. Let me know if you're concerned. Unfortunately, a lot of people, they didn't know the 6th edition. They came into PMI, they got certified on the so-called 7th, which hardly anyone is telling you to read it. And I don't blame the trainers that are not telling you to read it, because the value in it, except the principles, the other stuff is so conflated. Now we're steering it a little bit towards Process Groups of Practice Guide, but then we got this weird 10-headed, I don't know, 7-headed, weird looking beast with a tail coming out of its ears. That's what we're working on right now. We need to lose that quick. All right, enough said. Thanks for joining me. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Bye for now.